Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Tudor. And today I'm going to speak about testing frontends with Nightwatch, Saucelabs, and CI with Travis. And first of all, I would like to introduce myself. As I said, my name is Tudor Barbu. I'm an engineer. You can see my Twitter account, my GitHub. I publish a lot of open source projects. And I work for Shipstead. But I would like to mention that the opinions are my own, not my company's. So in case something goes wrong, don't blame them. That being said, I would like to start with a quote that I found on the internet. It goes like, everybody has a testing environment. Some people are lucky enough to have a totally separate one to run production in. And apparently there are smart people on the internet. I don't know, I found this on Twitter. And basically, I want to have a testing environment. Sooner or later, my application is going to be tested, and I don't want it to be tested by the end user. I want it to be tested by somebody else before that. So for the purpose of this presentation, I've published on my GitHub account an example, a fully working example. So yeah, well, it's about testing. So if something is wrong, just do a pull request. Basically, it's a news widget that you can drop in any page, initialize it, and then it will connect to an API and we'll get the data displayed to the user. It's a simple news widget, like if you use a WordPress site or something like that, you've probably seen similar things. So first of all, I'm going to talk about smoke testing. And what is a smoke test? A smoke test is a test that ensures the very minimum functionality of application. So nothing too fancy, just the fact that it works and it does the bare minimum, the MVP of testing, so to speak, if you want. So in my case, this is the widget, how it looks. And yes, it is Comic Sans, the font. It's on purpose for the designers, Fabio. Basically, what would the test be like? I would want to make sure that all the categories are being populated correctly from the API, that the first tab is selected. If I click on the second one, it works. The news items are populated correctly, and the missing images, if I don't get an image from the API, is handled correctly with a placeholder. Basically, and also the dates are formatted correctly from a timestamp. Basically, if I have all this, I can release, even if it doesn't work in any fancy browser, or if you have a weird edge case when it breaks, it's okay. The smoke test works for most users, for 95% of the users, and the basic functionality works. So now, I want to test this, and I want to set up a testing environment. And how will the perfect testing environment look like for me? First of all, no Java, because originally, Selenium was written in Java. Yeah. And a lot of the implementations follow that pattern. And it's difficult. I mean, I write JavaScript, and I have to set up a completely different environment to write my test in Java, compile, wait for Eclipse to load for 20 minutes, and so on. I don't want that. Also, for integration tests, I want them to keep them independent of the backend. So I want to have mocks. I want to make sure that I can control the input. For example, on the previous slide here, I want to make sure that the text that I insert in the page is the correct one. So I need to control what comes on the API. So I need to mock the backend. I also want it to be cross-browser, as many browsers as possible, and to run automatically across all of them. And then I also want to be able to run my tests locally to debug them, or at least to get enough information about the bug to convince the project manager that it's a feature. And also I want to run that in Travis automatically as a part of my continuous integration process. So to start with, I'm going to go through the tools that I'm going to use to get to that environment. The first one is Nightwatch, which is a very popular JavaScript testing framework. It gains popularity. It's a wrapper around Selenium, and it also supports BDD style expectations, behavior-driven development testing, when you go, expect this to be blah, blah, blah. And also more the traditional style of testing with assertions, when you go and say, assert this variable to equal that value. And it's extensible via plugins. Then for mocking, I can use between Restify and Express. Restify is newer than Express. It's aimed at mocking APIs, and from my experience, doesn't work in all cases. So if you like a challenge, use Restify. If you don't, just stay with Express. It works every time. And Saucelabs. Saucelabs is a cross-browser testing platform. It offers over 800 combinations between browsers and operating systems. It is free for open source projects, so if you have an open source project, you can use that to test it. And it supports both automated and manual testing. And the coolest thing about it, or one of its coolest features, is called Source Connect, which basically is a command line tool that you can install locally on your computer, and then you set the credentials in the environment as environment variables. And when you run Source Connect, it basically creates a tunnel between your computer or Travis and Saucelabs. And when you open the browser in Saucelabs and you go to localhost, to that IP, it will actually connect to your computer and run the things that run on your computer, your local server, which is really cool because you don't have to handle DNS, you don't have to do all kind of network-related magic to make it work. Usually, if you've used VirtualBox, you may have experienced this when you have to connect from VirtualBox to the host computer, and you have to do this kind of network magic. So this works right off the box. If you run Source Connect, it links your computer to Saucelabs, and you have access to over 800 browser OS combinations. And the last one is the integration server, Travis, very popular. I think everybody has used Travis at least once. It's maybe the most popular one. So I'm not going to go any further. Also, it has a free version for open source. So what's the anatomy of a test? How will I have the tools, I know what I want to test, and now I want to actually do the test. How will the test look like? The anatomy of a test. Basically, it's pretty simple. I need to serve the page from somewhere, load it. Then I need to load the script, point the script to a mock API to be able to control the input, and then run the assertions. It's fairly simple. This is what I need. And to achieve that, I'm going first to use Express. And on the left-hand side there, it's the file system, or the organization of the file system of a regular JavaScript project. I have the source folder. I have the dist, where I put the artifacts from the build, node modules, and my test. And basically, I want to make sure that I can serve everything correctly from Express. So if the URL starts with dist, I serve everything statically from the dist folder. If it starts with mock something, mock test name, I assume that this is a call for a mocked API. So I serve it from end-to-end tests, server, fixtures, name of the test. In my case, is mock. And also, if something starts with static, that is the static page, the one which I load everything in, and I serve that statically from the static folder. This is a configuration file for Nightwatch. In the top side, we have the basic folders and paths from where Nightwatch will load, will look for tests, and will load additional plugins and so on. Then on the test settings, I have the configuration for Saucelabs. And I use to inject the credentials from the environment as environment variables. And at the bottom, I don't know if you can see the laser pointer, every such object is a configuration, represents a platform, a configuration between a browser and running on a specific OS in Saucelabs. So I can add how many of these I want. Of course, the test will take exponentially longer. So to run a test, basically, I want to have an npm run test command, which is kind of the standard that I'm using. This will be started from the package.json, and then for ease of use, I wrap everything else in a runner. So I have a runner, a package.js that starts the runner. The runner configures Express, starts it to start serving the files. Then in the Nightwatch configuration, I configure Nightwatch, I run the tests, and I have a Nightwatch globals. In this file, I need to send information to Saucelabs whether the test has passed or not. Saucelabs just gives me a browser, says, okay, this is your browser, do whatever you want with it. I do whatever I want with it, and then I need to tell it, on this browser has failed or has passed. Saucelabs doesn't have this information, Nightwatch does it, and to do this, I have a hook, an after each test hook that I run, and I send that information to Saucelabs. And then when everything is done, I stop Express and I return control to the shell. And in the end, this is how a test looks like, more or less. It's a simple function that receives as a parameter the browser object. Then I navigate to a specific URL. I wait for the first element to load. Be generous here. Sometimes you can have false negatives if the interval is too short. Sometimes it takes a while for everything to load. So be generous, add 1-2 seconds for everything to load. Then I start to make some assertions. So for example, I want to make sure that I have 2 list items in the headers. I have 2 categories. So I use CSS selectors. Nightwatch supports both CSS and XSS. I just go to every such element. I assume I test that it's where it's supposed to be. I test that it has the classes that I want it to have. Then I click on a specific one. I wait 50 milliseconds for the page to react, and then I test that the changes that I expected to happen have happened. And so pretty much it's fairly simple. The keywords and the interface of Nightwatch, it's very easy to follow and understand. So I'm going to try to do a demo, which is generally a bad idea during live presentations. So bear with me. So first of all, as I said, I'm going to start Sauce Connect. This should connect to Saucelabs now. And yeah, should connect. It takes a couple of minutes. That's why I said be generous when the tests start. The first the first run can be slower. And now I have tunnel between my computer and Saucelabs, and I can just run the tests. And hopefully, as I said, it takes a while, and there are some problems that you may have in this, sometimes the delays, and also keep in mind that the servers from Saucelabs are in the United States, so you can have time zone differences. So for example, if you generate something and send it to the browser and expect the browser to do some time-based operation, keep in mind that the time of the browser is different than the time of the server. So as I said, it takes a bit, and in Saucelabs you pay by minute. So all the tests have passed in Chrome and have failed in Internet Explorer. Shocker. So, yeah. And now, how do I debug an application? So I have a MacBook, and I know that the tests have failed in Internet Explorer. And then you remove the node modules folders, you reinstall all the dependency, and then you're like, yeah, so still doesn't work. And basically what I want is to return to the moment where my test has failed. I want to be able to reproduce that exact step where something went wrong and manually debug it. And to do this, I have in my package.json file a command called test debug, which will just start Express, and then it will serve everything like it was served in the test, but I can manually connect from Saucelabs and do some debugging. So I'm going to try to do that now. So in the Saucelabs interface, I can click a manual test, and I can select the browser that has failed and my tunnel. And I start a session. This starts fairly fast compared to the, well, depends how you define the fairly fast. Actually, I need to run the debug server. So now nothing happens, and I need to debug. And all browsers in Saucelabs, they come with developer tools enabled. So I just go to the console, do a refresh, and it tells me that there's no such method ends with, which is annoying. Now going back to, I'm going to try to fix that. And this was obviously rehearsed, so should work. Can you hear me? Yeah, cool. So this is where the problem is, and instead of using ends with, I'm going to use a regular expression. Okay, and now has worked. I was able to debug it in Internet Explorer, and if I run the test again, it will pass. Now I can commit. And this is very, very helpful. The fact that I have access with all those browsers without having to run VirtualBox or any other virtualization on my computer. And going forward, I also want to run the tests automatically every time I have a build, like part of my continuous integration. So for that, with Travis supports out of the box Saucelabs. So you need to just, in the travis.yml here, say source connect true, and it will load it automatically. Another good idea is, and you also need to install Java 8 because again, Selenium needs Java. And also it's a good idea to set the time zone to your time zone and not allow Travis to set it. You can have weird bugs or false positives, false negatives, and so on. And also I need to be able to set up the credentials that I use for Travis to connect to Saucelabs. And the way to do that, I can install the Travis command line tools as a Ruby gem. And with it, I can encrypt the credentials and store them as encrypted strings in the travis.yml file. Travis encrypts with a public private key, and the private key is linked with the repository. So even if you copy those strings and you put it in a different Travis YML, it will not work. So this is a safe way of injecting credentials in or keeping secrets in the Git repository. Travis allows for that. And there are some problems. As I said, latency between Travis or your local host and Saucelabs can lead to false negatives. If you don't wait enough, it will just time out because it was slow, not because the element wasn't there. Different in time zones. Sometimes you generate something on the server, you send it to the client, to the browser, and you expect the browser to display like something like 5 minutes ago, half an hour ago, whatever. And given the time zone difference, this again may cause problems. I debugged one for about an hour, a couple of days ago. And also booting VMs can be slow. So try to group your tests and optimize your testing schedule. You don't have to run all the tests on every commit. Well, that's about it. Thank you. And just so you know, I work for Schibsted. We are a very cool company. We actually use Travis, and these are part of the thing of my daily job. And we're hiring, so if you're interested, please approach me afterwards, and we can touch base. Or you can just go to our job site. So thank you, and if you have any questions.
All right. Someone has any question? Just raise your hand. Okay.
Hi, thanks for that. Is it possible to make Nightwatch report the error from the console to your own console kind of thing, so that you don't have to go in and do the debugging?
I'm not sure. So basically, Nightwatch is a wrapper around Selenium. Can do whatever Selenium can do and cannot do anything that Selenium cannot. So if other Selenium-based tools can do it, I'm sure Nightwatch can. I didn't have necessarily that problem, and I didn't use it. So probably you can in Nightwatch. I personally didn't have that problem yet. Okay. I think over there was... No.
Sorry.
Sorry. Thanks. Johan here. So I'm wondering, is there a specific reason why you choose to use like Express or Restify instead of some interceptor like knock or something for your mocking?
I don't know, it just came natural, like
Okay, all right.
npm install Express and or like npm install Restify. I think if you go to the npm registry and look for mock APIs, Restify comes first. That didn't work. I moved back to Express, and that's the whole. I found something that works. If it works, don't fix it. So.
Hola, you are stopping the test with Jasmine.
I'm sorry.
You are stopping the test with Jasmine, or to use only Nightwatch. Or Jasmine with Phantom browser.
So Jasmine is more for unit tests.
Yes.
So these are integration tests. So for example, if I have a component that it's a unit of code that I can easily unit test. Yes. Although we use Karma and Chai and this. But Nightwatch, it's an integration test, where it means everything comes together in the browser and it works end to end.
Thank you.
I think over there.
Just an answer for the logs, the guy that asked before. Yeah, so in the Nightwatch configuration file, you have an output folder, and it puts everything. There's a log file, a Selenium log file, and all the logs are there. And you can have XML reports too, so you can.
Over there.
Maybe it's not related with Nightwatch, but everybody mocks its request. It's an integration test. Am I missing something? Like if the backend service changes and your mock doesn't change accordingly, your tests are gonna pass. So what's the main argument behind mocking requests in an integration test?
Well, so sometimes I do end-to-end tests where I connect to the actual backend. But before that, for example, I want to make sure that if the backend serves 3 news items, I display 3 news items, not 2, not 5. And this, it's easier to just insert mocks than to have another build of the backend running somewhere and then do it from there. If the backend team changes the backend, they're going to tell me because I need to change the front end. And when I change the front end, I also update my mocks. But before going to prod, we always test against like real time. Real
that if you have the backend team in-house, no? But if you're consuming I mean, we do it as well, and we use Knock actually, but I'm rethinking of the best practice of doing that if later I'm gonna fail when I hit the real backend server. Like, is that a step really useful? Because there is a maintainability cost on these mocks, no? There is a JSON fixture that you have to copy and paste to your code base. And that's really annoying for me.
Yeah, I'll give you that. It's super annoying. But from my standpoint, from my experience, it is because sometimes the backend doesn't change, and I have a lot of changes in the front end. And I need to make sure, so for example, during A/B testing, or I need to make sure that the same functionality is there, that I don't lose any items, and for that, it's very useful to make sure that I can control what comes on the pipeline. And then I can, at a later time, just switch where I point the API to the actual backend. So for example, for my local host, I can just use mocks to be able to test or to test for really weird edge cases. Like what if the backend sends me one of those German words that's like 40 letters with no spaces. How will that be displayed? I don't want to go in the backend and add one of those every single time. I just want to be able to mock it locally.
Yeah, good point.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I can maybe follow up on that question to maybe clear up some confusion. That I think that I mean there's a clear like separation between like integration and end-to-end tests, and in fact, actually, like, I like to have like 4 types of tests. Like, it's end-to-end, which is going to the server, so without mocking, and that's, I mean, that's where you really are sure that the application is like working. I mean, the main functionality, and then you do the integration test where you mock, and that's where you need to mock some like the integration of various components like in a view, and where you need to control like the backend response. And additionally, I also like to do screenshot tests, yeah, and then also unit tests, yeah, and I'm using, I don't know if anybody knows it, but maybe it's a shameless plug because I work for that company, but I'm using Sencha Test, and they support Jasmine, which, and yeah, you can then write end-to-end tests, integration tests, screenshot tests, and unit tests with Jasmine. Sorry for that plug.
No. I mean, it's true. Quality assurance is like a multi-layer thing. You can't have a single level of testing and expect everything to work. So you have multiple levels, and sometimes, as I said, you need to mock some, or you need to test from some edge cases, which are really difficult to do in the backend every single time. Anybody else?
Last one. Huh?
Hi, thanks. Is it possible to use Nightwatch without Saucelabs?
Yes, you can install. So it's just a wrapper around Selenium, and you can just install the Chrome driver locally or the Firefox driver or whatever, and run the test locally. For example, in my company, we actually sometimes just run the test for speed in the local against my browser. But every time I commit, I want to run on several. But you can configure it against any Selenium-powered browser.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, so thank you, and well, happy testing.